Hi guys, I'm Zoe from Zoe's Fancy Cakes, and in today's video I wanted to show you how I created my piece for Cake International. So a lot of you have been watching me do this throughout the year, so I was really kindly granted permission by Puffin and Penguin Books to work on a project based on the characters from Tom Fletcher's Amazing Christmasaurus books. So just before the video starts, I need to say a massive thank you to Tom Fletcher, Puffin Books, Penguin Books, Shane Devries, also to Cake International for letting me do this, but also to Sarah Tino as well for providing me with a lot of the fondant and modelling paste for making these guys. Thank you everybody, and thank you so much to the people that came and helped me last minute trying to put everything together when I realised I ran out of time. Enjoy the video. So I've got quite a few of the Christmasaurus books, and they've all got really nice illustrations in by Shane Devries. I absolutely love all the drawings in these books, and all the books had the images of the Christmasaurus, Santa, the reindeer. So these were the main ones that I wanted to concentrate on. First of all, I needed to draw them in large scale onto the wall. So I've got some wallpaper, just some plain wallpaper that I drew onto to get them to the size that I wanted first. So I did this for each of the characters that I was going to do. And then I also needed to map out where I was going to fit internal structure. So now I've got them drawn out, I can put on where internal support is going to have to go. So, and this is the same for the antlers. So the antlers were pretty big, so we drew out a template for them. And then inside, they are actually metal rod. So like the threaded rod that I use in a lot of other things. These were probably one of the hardest things to make. I had to cover them in polystyrene, sand them down because it needed to be lightweight. And then we also needed to make bases and boards for the internal structure. I'm really not very good with a saw, guys, so this took me quite some time. And then inside, these are not cakes, so I wanted to try and use as many old dummies as I could. So I've got like old display ones, they're very old, that I tried to strip all the icing off to see if we could use them inside the characters. The small ones were easy for when I was doing like the pile of presents and elves, the smaller things, and they went quite well inside legs, that kind of thing. You can see here, like I've managed to kind of sand them down and shape them. I also did have to get some bigger blocks of polystyrene, which turns out were an absolute pain to cut. I do have heated cutters as well for these, and it still was really difficult to cut them down. You can see all the old ones in the legs and things that I used there. They were easier because they were smaller, less to cut off. I think I probably breathed in an awful lot of fumes while making this. In fact, I've had pretty much a bad cough since making this project. I did wear a mask as well. But you can see it starts to take shape gradually. So I started it about 5 months in advance of the cake show. So these were made for Cake International, guys, to go on display there. For a while, the Christmasaurus looked a little bit like a duck. They were all quite difficult in their own ways to do. I would say the reindeer was definitely the easiest. Father Christmas was, even though he looks a pretty basic shape, he was still fairly complicated to create. Took me a while to carve. And then the simple things were things like the presents. So I could leave the polystyrene dummies pretty much the shape that they came. And then I just covered them in piping gel and stuck fondant on to make them look like presents. I could have wrapped actual cardboard boxes, but I didn't know if that was kind of cheating a bit. Although saying that, none of this is cake inside. I had fun with a lot of the smaller bits as well. So once the internal structure's done, the polystyrene's cut to shape, then we can start doing things like the detail. I started with the easier things like the elves, and I enjoy a lot of the smaller detail bits like adding the present, the bow on the present, all that kind of thing. So the elf was to be made to be stood on a stack of presents. And that was just to cover like the front of the TV stand when it was going to be on display at CI. And then Santa was definitely the most challenging because he has like a cloak that hangs low off his big belly. So Santa actually has like a wire mesh that comes down from the polystyrene to the floor to help support the fondant, as I was worried that it wouldn't hold up on its own. If I just hung fondant down there or even modeling chocolate, you know, that would struggle to stay on. Also the diamond shapes, I couldn't find a diamond shaped cutter, so I took a circle and I just bent it into a diamond shape, and that is what I used to create most of Santa's coat. That and fondant. So I used the Sarah Tino because Sarah Tino very kindly sent me all this paste. I did decide I was going to change the colour red, which was probably a massive mistake because it took so long to colour all the paste. But I did have help with that. And then it was just adding the diamonds. Took a while, but it definitely, I think, was worth adding the diamonds on there. Now his face. This took a little while to make. I made it once and it was far too small, so I made it again. That is modelling chocolate and fondant mixed together for his face as well, guys. And then the beard, this used so much paste. Fondant, I used white Sarah Tino fondant for the beard, but it used so much. More than I thought it was going to use. And then it was just onto smaller decorations, like on his little elbows and his outfit. These were the most fun bits to create.
I still found I was adding more and more polystyrene inside his beard as we were going along as well. Now the dinosaur is the one that I left till last to do because I thought it was going to be the quickest one. It was the most difficult in that I had no way of hiding the seams on this Christmasaurus. He's made with a mix of modelling chocolate and fondant together to cover the whole of him. The colours underneath, the red and the green, is everywhere where I didn't have a smooth bit of polystyrene, so I kind of undercoated it with more leftover fondant. A lot of it was like gone off bits and stuff that I had in the cupboards that I thought I might as well use. The good thing about using modelling chocolate is I can heat it and blend it together a little bit, so it was very cold in the room. I had to use a hairdryer, and I used this little spatula thing a lot that Carla Pug uses in hers. We sell them on the website anyway, I don't know what they're called. Then I had to look at different textures for his skin because the seams would not completely go, so I thought if we texture the Christmasaurus, you are less likely to see all those seams. So I had a bit of a play around with different texture mats. I ended up using just a couple of them for the majority of his body. One of them was a bit too kind of crocodile skin-like. I did have to cut the edges off the texture mold as well, and because the paste was starting to dry, I had to hairdryer it as I was going along just to soften it enough to get the texture back in. And then it was onto the fun parts like painting the eye, and it's just food colouring that I used here. And then I gave him a little bit of airbrushing. I probably should have waited while I'd completely finished him before airbrushing him, but I was a bit too eager to do this bit. I'm not very good with airbrushing, guys. It's not very neat, but for this design it didn't matter too much. Now, I also used some Saracino Isomalt because I thought it might look nice to have like ice-looking bits on him. He's meant to be like icicle and wintry, so I thought Isomalt would be a good way to show that, but I'm pretty rubbish with Isomalt. I did add some food colouring to it to create little different coloured blue droplets, and they looked great when I first done them. They looked very clear and shiny, but I forgot to glaze them before they kind of went dull, so some of them were quite dull, but it's fine. I did glaze them in the end, and the effect that isn't supposed to be on them I thought kind of looked quite lizard-like. So the odd texture on these little Isomalt bits is not meant to be there, but I figured it worked okay for what we were doing, so I kept it. So then we were on to, again, a bit more detailing on the Christmasaurus. So all his like spines and things, I just cut them out of blue fondant. So this is just the fondant. I'd mixed it to the blue colour myself. I used the Saracino one. Some of the bigger ones have polystyrene in the middle, and then the smaller ones I just cut. Because it was easier to get a nice sharp shape by just cutting straight into a block of fondant to create like the spikes on his back, and then also the ones that go onto his head as well. And you can see at this point I've put a bit of airbrushing on. I've put a couple of different blues on there, and the main part of him, I don't know if we call it a mane because it's kind of like blue icicles, I guess, that go around his head and his neck. That was one of the hardest bits to do, and that's what took me the longest on the dinosaur. I would say I spent about 3 days decorating the dinosaur. The reindeer maybe a week and a half decorating, and Santa definitely over 2 weeks to decorate. And none of that is including carving the polystyrene or making the internal structure. I think it took me at least a month to carve all the polystyrene for these guys. And then little details like the claws, they didn't take too long, but I had to put in pieces of like aluminium wire or cocktail sticks to hold different pieces in place because everything was quite heavy on this guy. And as I start adding more blue to his mane, he's becoming more and more front heavy and wanting to topple over. Again, you can see the polystyrene in some of the larger parts on the back of his head. Yeah, used a lot of blue paste doing these like big, are they geodes or crystals? I don't really know. It would have been nice for me to do them in Isomalt, but I think it would have used a lot of Isomalt, and I'm not very good with Isomalt. It's something I maybe need to learn to do a bit more on, because it would have looked nice in that, but you know, fondant has done the job for me instead. Also a bit of airbrushing on these just to finish them off, make them look a bit nicer. It's just a darker blue and a purple that I did spray onto these. Also going to put some airbrushing on the spines down his back as well. Then for the reindeer, again, it's a mix of the brown modelling chocolate, the white modelling chocolate, and a little bit of fondant in here. And I mixed it in different quantities to get different shades of brown each time. This one took a long time because of all the hairlines I had to put in him. I had shorter ones everywhere around his face and his nose, and then longer as it came down the neck. And then I used a Kemper tool to texture the nose. I figured this was actually a bit quicker than drawing individual hairlines in each time. And I did do a tiny bit of shading around his eye area, and my plan was to shade the reindeer all over. In fact, my plan was to shade all of them all over, but I didn't get time. I spent so long doing the hairlines on pretty much every part of his body that I just ran out of time to do all the extra details. Now, the reindeer's antlers, they got very heavy as we went along, but they are covered now in dark modelling chocolate. So I used the Serratino modelling chocolate. I wet them so they're nice and sticky and then put on desiccated coconut. So it gave them a bit more of a velvety look. It's not really velvety, is it? But, you know, more of a texture. I did airbrush them as well. And then my favourite bit was just putting like this stitching detail on the reindeer's outfit. And then I texturized, like, it's not really a saddle, is it? Because nobody rides the reindeer, but I don't know what else to call it. This section here. And then a lot of the details I painted with gold. And the gold is the gold powder just mixed with glaze so that it doesn't come back off. Because often the gold powder, when it dries, even with dipping solution or clear alcohol, it can kind of catch on your hands and stuff when you touch it. So I mixed it with glaze to make sure it didn't come back off. So I spent a while making a few little details. Again, I wish I could have spent a bit longer finessing it a bit more, but time was running out. Okay, so it is Tuesday morning and we are heading to Cake International. We're gonna try and get all the things I've been making in the vans. So there's 3 big pieces and then like all smaller ones. I'm gonna put them together when I get there. Getting them out. I had made sure that they did fit through the doors, so they did fit through the door frames. I did have a bit of a panic when we made it out into the garden at work because no one had measured the gate entrance to check that they went through, and it was slightly narrower than the doors. So I did make these on wheels so that they would move easily about, although the grass was a bit wet, and they're very heavy. So I was very worried about them sinking into the ground and us not being able to move them. You can see I only did one half of the reindeer. I didn't bother putting the hairlines in the other half. You weren't going to see it. I considered finishing it and getting that done when we went to CI, but, you know, no one saw it. I didn't end up with time to do that. So lots of people at the show did ask how we transported them to Cake International. And, well, this is how. So we got them in a van. We did need a van with, like, the lifting bit up at the back. I don't know what you call it. So that we didn't have to physically lift it at any point. It was a bit touch and go whether the reindeer fit. Because I hadn't considered the height of the back of the van. I'd measured the door frames, but not the back of the van. So, yeah, he was just about the right height. Just. There was millimeters to spare there. Exactly the same with the dinosaur. Now, the dinosaur, I had to be extra careful of because of him being front heavy. We did have to kind of create extra ramps with wood to get them out as well. So I hope if any of you guys are ever thinking of doing like big showpieces for like the big cake shows, that it just gives you a bit of an insight into how I made these and how we transport them, how we get them out the building, and also that they're not made in cake. It is a big waste of food to do them in cake. I mean, it's got a lot of fondant on that's kind of a bit of a waste because obviously it's never going to be eaten, all this fondant and modelling chocolate. But if it was cake, well, I wouldn't have time to make something this big in real cake, not with as much detail anyway. I would have to have like a full team working on it to do it fast enough if it was real cake. And like I say, it wasn't going to get eaten at the cake show, so it would have just been a bit of a waste of food. So that's why it's polystyrene in the middle. You can see on the back of Father Christmas as well, I didn't do the back of him. He was being pressed flat against a wall, so again, it would have just meant extra paste that wasn't ever going to be seen. So I've just left that polystyrene. It's completely naked. He at the back. He can't travel with his head or his hands because they are too tall to fit in the van and also out the door. So those bits will be added when we get to the show. The antlers also have to travel separate. We've made it to Cake International. So let's hope that they've made it okay in transit. So even though these guys were strapped into the van, it's still very stressful opening the door. This was the worst bit in case anything had moved or broken in transit. Okay, so before I take them out of the van, I went and had a look at the stand they were going on, so I know where I'm taking them to. Now, they were actually drilled together, these pieces, so they couldn't move apart while they were in transit. So we're taking them, or undrilling them. They were strapped in really securely. So now it's just a case of getting them out the van, where I noticed that you can see underneath there's a bit that I didn't finish. We can do that when it's on the stand. And like I say, these are on wheels, and we attached a little rope, so they are fairly easy to drag around. So I was very lucky in that I do have a team of staff and helpers and volunteers that were kind enough to help with all the transit and getting me set up at Cake International. So a massive thank you to everyone that did help me. So we unloaded all the pieces and then we set up the backdrop. So I had some big pieces printed with images taken from the book. We edited them a little bit, and these were stuck to the backing boards with a huge amount of Velcro for our backdrop. And then of course our pieces were put in place. At this stage, I could then add the antlers to the reindeer, and Santa's hand and heads then also needed adding as well. So these were made separate, and once they're in place, All I needed to do was put a bit of fondant just around for some detailing around the top edge of his gloves, and that is going to hide the seam or the join between the arm and the glove. I would love to say I did this really neat and tidy, but I didn't at all. I feel when you're at the cake show setting up, even though the cake show hasn't started yet, there's that bit of extra pressure, and I didn't do the bits at the show very neatly. I wish I could have done this bit at home or in my studio where I could have spent a bit longer on getting it nice and neat. And his hands are covered in the dark chocolate modelling paste. It was the Saracino one, which was quite good because it set quite hard for me. I added a few extra decoration pieces then, like snowflakes, and also the boards. So we had to cover the boards in some sort of fabric snow. I don't know what you call it, guys. We just stapled that on with a staple gun. And then added more snowflakes to the antlers. So these snowflakes that we're adding here, they were just pre-made in modelling paste or flour paste, so they'd set nice and hard. And they're actually hanging off clear fishing wire. Now the reindeer does only have one ear. I know it should have two, but I figured by the time I'd got the antlers on and you couldn't see the other side of him, that I wasn't going to bother with that other ear. And now for Santa's head. Santa's head is so heavy, it's extremely heavy. In fact, what I might do is try run a competition at some point over on my Facebook or Instagram page, saying guess the weight of how much paste I've put on one of these guys. Keep an eye out for that, I think I'll do that soon. So it took a couple of us, or even 3 of us, to lift the head without it falling off. Pushing it into the polystyrene was quite hard work. I needed to make sure this didn't fall off, because the last thing I want is this coming off and hitting somebody that's looking at it, because his head is so heavy. So once his head is actually in place, then I'm able to finish the beard and connect like his head to his body properly. It's just a case then of adding the white fondant to match the rest of the beard up to his face. I could have probably done with adding some polystyrene, so I didn't need as much white fondant, but I forgot to bring my heated polystyrene cutter to cut it to shape. And then we added the finishing touches with little signs, a little bit of shading on his beard, so I just added a bit of grey edible powder. And then we are almost set up. So I did set up a TV in the background as well. The idea being that it would show people how it was made throughout the show, and also add some Christmas music playing as well. I put a couple of the books out so that people knew what it was from, although it does say on the backdrop as well. And yeah, I think I'm actually fairly happy with this one. I would have liked to have spent a little bit longer adding a few more details, and I only got one elf done. Ideally, I would have liked to have done a whole collection of elves. Apologies if you can hear my dog snoring in the background. So then I just got on with setting up my other stand, because we sold products, because I have my own products on a different stand at Cake International. And then it was just a case of waiting for the show to open on the Friday morning and to see what everyone thought of it. And I kept getting asked which was my favourite of the 3. And you know what, I really don't know. When I made the reindeer, because I made the reindeer first, I was so happy with the reindeer that I thought, I'm not even sure I want to make any of the other characters now. But I'm glad I did. I think I like all of them. I do like all of them. Do you guys have a favourite? Let me know in the comments below. Which is your favourite? Do you prefer the Christmasaurus, Father Christmas, or do you prefer the reindeer? I would have loved to have done the full range of reindeers for this one. And guys, I just need to say a huge thank you to everyone that came to Cake International and actually came over to look at the Christmasaurus. I'm glad I did this design. Like I say, it was based on the characters that Shane Devries had illustrated from Tom Fletcher's Christmasaurus books, and I'm so pleased I did it. The feedback from you guys was absolutely amazing. So thank you so much to everybody that came to see it. Thank you everybody that tagged themselves in photos and shared it for social media as well. I also do need to apologise that I didn't get a chance to reshare everyone's. We were quite busy at the cake show, so I was very behind with all my social media stuff. I'm still a little bit behind with it now, guys. But yeah, thank you so much. It means the world that you guys were taking pictures and tagging me. Thank you to Ellis. Ellis is just 5 and she came over and spent quite a bit of time with us on our stand, and Ellis has come all the way with her family from Canada. She's a big internet sensation. She makes cakes better than me, and she's 5. So yeah, it went down well, and then it was time to take it apart. The bit I did not want to do, I had to take his arms or his hands back off, and then of course I had to cut through his beard and we had to remove his head, and then yeah. Then it was just a case of packing them back in the van. And a massive thank you actually to all you guys that helped me pack away as well. Everyone was so amazing at the show. We received so much help from everyone, and it really was appreciated. Because as per usual, I think we were pretty much the last ones to leave the cake show because we're so slow at packing away. So that's a wrap, guys. Let's get home with them. If you like the video, be sure to hit the thumbs up button and leave me a comment below. You can see more of my tutorials by clicking on the images on screen now. If you haven't already, make sure you click the subscribe button to stay up to date with my future tutorials. There are also links in the description box below where you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and more.